Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. What a show today. Last night I was looking at my retirement accounts. I went online on the Social Security Administration's website to log in to see where I was at with Social Security. I was looking at my personal retirement accounts, getting ready for this interview today with a real leading expert in retirement. And, everybody's thinking about retirement. I don't care if you're 20 years old or an old guy like me. I'm older than history, of course, but we're all thinking about retirement. And you need to think about what type of investments make sense for you at certain times of your life. So we wanted to bring in a real worldwide leading expert in the field. His name is Joey DiDomenico. And you probably know Joey if you have anything to do with retirement accounts or know about the retirement space at all. He's the founder and CEO of Vetted Retirement Technologies. And I tell you, he's out of New York. He has such a great background. I mean, he's sold a company. He was acquired many years ago from an online crowdfunding portal. And he's just done such great work in the retirement space. It's really remarkable. And this Vetted Retirement Technology is so interesting because we're going to talk about retirement today and alternative investments. And it's such a great combination. I wanted to bring the expert in the field on the show. Joey, welcome to the DotCom magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
Thank you. It's great being on the show.
It's great to have you, Joey. Let's go. Let's do what made us famous. Let's pull the lens back to 30,000 feet. Let's talk about vetted retirement technologists or technologies. You're technologists, but it's vetted retirement technologies. And tell us what it's about. And then we're going to get into it. We have so many questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people don't know you can buy alternative investments. That's anything private. That's things that aren't stocks or bonds or mutual funds. You can do private loans. You can buy private stock. There's almost anything you can do in your retirement plan that's allowed. And in fact, there's so many things that are allowed that the IRS publication 590 that talks about investments only lists out the three things you can't invest in your retirement plan. And that's, you can't buy life insurance. You can't buy collectibles and wine. They figure you're just going to drink that. That's not an investment. And you can't invest in S corps. That's a person. You can't just buy a person with a retirement plan, but everything else is on the table. There's just some rules around it. So there's some disqualifying events. There's some investments that aren't eligible to be in a retirement plan. As long as you follow those rules, you can invest in almost anything. And the thing about it is people like to invest in the things that they're aware of, things they know about, things they can kick the tires on. So there's an entire industry out there. A lot of people aren't aware of it. I've had tax attorneys come to me and say, well, you can buy what in your IRA account? So people need to be more aware of it, but there's also some problems with it because there's some things that you can't do with your IRA account. And the IRS is a little bit concerned about it because there is some taxes that are being avoided that should be paid on some of these transactions. So that's something that needs to be cleaned up. The industry has a little bit of a problem helping people and decide what they can and can't invest in the retirement plan, because it's a little bit of a consultation, with a specialist of this is what I'm looking to invest in. Here's the people involved. Here's how the transaction works. Here's my activity level. All these different things need to be examined before you know it's a good investment or not. And that's one of the things that Vetted Retirement Technologies does. Instead of sitting in front of an attorney for an hour talking about this, it's just a TurboTax style question and answer online tool. It just takes a few minutes. But it's a technology that regulators are looking to deploy. Trust companies and banks are looking to get more sophisticated in how they allow their customers to scrub their transactions. And individual investors need an easy way to go in and find out, can I make this loan to my brother on his flip project? So that's what we're working on.
Yeah, I love it. It's a lot. I mean, you make it sound so easy. But of course, when I was a young man, when I started investing, everybody talked about stocks and bonds. But, there's a next generation, I'll call it. And, they need the tools really to begin growing what I would call do-it-yourself investing and really, investing in maybe unconventional assets, things that maybe back when I was a young man, we didn't even think about. And you want to make sure that the IRA investments are very compliant, and your technology and your platform is really solving all those problems. So congratulations. Let's talk about it just a little bit. What are some of the unconventional type assets for our viewers watching the show that maybe they haven't thought about, that you can invest in that asset in your IRA in a very compliant way?
I've seen some very creative things. I've heard of somebody buying a truckload of palm oil from South America, having it driven up to the States and sold it for a large profit in his IRA account. I've seen people invest in racehorses. There's virtually no limit as long as it's an investment. And the retirement plan, the purpose of the retirement plan is to benefit your retirement in the future. So that's the 408 and 401 section of the code. Like the 501 section of the code is for nonprofit organizations who are in the business of benefiting some social good. And then for that, you get tax benefits. So the purpose of a 401k or an IRA is to benefit your personal retirement in the future. So that's why you can't use your IRA to buy a car that you can drive around today. That's a prohibited transaction. So you could buy a car and rent that out as an investment. That's perfectly fine. And I know people who do that. There's this great program called Turo. You buy an automobile and you rent it out like an Airbnb. Airbnb is one of the more popular ones now. Real estate is about 50 to 75% of all these private investments is invested in some type of real estate project, either a fix and flip or a rental property, the Airbnb, or they rent out to somebody for a long-term hold for the income, or they do a real estate syndication, or they invest a portion of a larger project with other investors. There's really unlimited, and there's 60 million IRAs out there, and it's a $37 trillion market. It's a lot of money. There's hundreds of billions of dollars invested in private stuff. There are some challenges with it. Anytime you have something that's really good, what's the drawbacks? The drawbacks is it has to be done properly, or you're risking your retirement. So there's a General Accountability Office of the Congress, and they're basically the study arm of Congress. Whenever they look at passing legislation or discussing a certain bill, they have this General Accountability Office go out and they study the problem. And they've done a number of studies on this, and what they found is there's a very large tax gap. There's a lot of transactions that are happening in these retirement accounts, millions of them, that need to be reported as taxable, and they're not. So they're looking to change that. And General Accountability Office does a very good job. In fact, I was involved in a couple of their studies. They've reached out to me to give comment on the industry. And what we found is there's a number of IRAs that are just non-compliant. So they're looking to clamp down on this. The regulators for the IRS, the Department of Labor is involved in this. The OCC of Treasury is involved in this, the FDIC insurance. So there's a number of stakeholders that want to see this go well. And I want to see it go well too, because here's the problem. The Build Back Better Act that was recently passed, there was a small period of time where in that bill it said, okay, no private investments in your retirement plan. That's it. You just can't do it. And it was overreaching, and everyone's in a panic to get this bill passed. So they ended up taking it out after they looked at it. Oh, that's too burdensome. That's a big problem. They're giving people 2 years to get out of a private investment in the retirement plan. Otherwise, their retirement plan was going to be disqualified. That's just too hard to do. If you just recently purchased a self-storage development with your friends, and it's a 7-year project, and the IRS says, get rid of this within 2 years, you're not going to be able to. So it was too big of a problem, but it was a shot across the bow. So what happens now is the industry essentially needs to have a cleanup of this. Otherwise, it's going to be cleaned up for us. And I want this opportunity to remain for all Americans to save their retirement in a tax advantaged way in the investments that they are prepared and willing to do. And a lot of times these investments, they've got higher returns, they're safer, they feel more comfortable in them, they may enjoy the things that they're investing in. So a lot of reasons why people should still be allowed to do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with stocks and bonds and mutual funds. It's just that we shouldn't limit it.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, you say it needs a cleanup. or it's going to be cleaned up for us. And I think what you're really saying is if it gets cleaned up for us, they're going to add a lot more rules and regulations and,
Yes.
a lot more things we're going to have to jump through. Now, let's talk about it because I love what you just said, Joey. I mean, it's remarkable. And of course, thank you so much for coming on the show. It really brings a great insight into what's happening. On your website, I mean, you have a great white paper that you wrote. It's, the case for automation. Anybody can, download it on your website. It's really remarkable. I had a chance to take a look at it this morning. And one thing that really makes sense and resonated coming from the white paper is, you say it in the title, the case for automation, and you're really trying to make this sort of complex and evolved situation simple for everybody to have access to. And I love that so much. Let's talk about that commitment that you have, Joey. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, so there's about 1,700 questions that you could ask about a particular investment in a retirement account. It's too many. You don't want to have to go through and answer every one of them. But like, for example, in a simplest transaction where you're just loaning money to somebody that you're not related to, there's about 6 questions. So if you answer those 6 questions, we could pump out a opinion letter to you automatically that says, with this criteria, this is allowed in your retirement plan. But it doesn't just stop there, because here's the interesting thing. If you make an investment that's allowed, it's held in your IRA account, everything is good. The thing is, retirement plan investments, they're not static. They're moving. So something could happen. For example, you may make a loan with your IRA account or 401k plan to somebody who's doing a flip project, but then you have to foreclose on that project. So you foreclose on that project. Now you're not a lender, you're an owner. And then let's say one of the other lenders is your father. Well, your IRA plan is not allowed to do a transaction with your father. That's a disqualified party. So disqualified parties are lineal ascendants and lineal descendants. So things are changing. So not only is this program giving you what you can and can't do and says, yes, you can make this transaction, it also gives you the constraints of what your activity with that investment is going forward. And also some IRAs, a lot of people don't know this, some IRAs need to file a tax return because some investments you can do. It's just that there's some taxable events involved too. So if you buy a building and you borrow money, the leverage portion of that investment is now taxed. You file a 992 tax return, you pay your income taxes, you make your money in your building, everybody's happy. The Treasury's happy, you're happy, it's going great. It just needs to be followed properly. And the problem is these transactions, there's millions of them. There aren't millions of people like me out there who can scrub these transactions. But it's similar to like a TurboTax. There's some modules of TurboTax that you go in, you answer a few questions, and it just gives you the answer and spits out the end result. This is very much like that. In fact, this tool is about 5% as complex as TurboTax. This is simple compared to your 1040 personal tax return. But it's still something that people need.
Yeah, I love it, of course. It's just a great idea. I always look at you, Joey, when I look at your history and, of course, your background, experience, your career, you're always ahead of the curve a little bit. And, the IRS has really embarked on a 6-year modernization plan, really estimated to cost, in the billions. They're saying 2 to 3 billion. By the time they're done, it could be a lot more than that. But they're going to invest in technology. And I think where you're at is you're saying, let's match what we're doing over here with what the IRS is doing over here to make sure that it all works and that people are protected. Is that one of the ideas behind the platform, Joey?
Absolutely. In fact, possibly a future partner of ours might be TurboTax. Possibly a partner in the future might be the IRS or another regulator. Because one of the ways that the IRS currently examines these IRA plans is they'll send out a letter with a bunch of questions on it. And then the taxpayer fills out the letter, basically the IRS saying, we have some questions about this transaction. We have a question about your retirement plan. Please answer it. They're usually not face-to-face audits like people think of traditionally of an audit in the IRS. They're just paper audits. But the problem with this is there's too many questions. There's too much data, too many, finite little things that they need to ask about. So what they really need to do is send out a link that they ask the questions in an online way. So it's more complete, it's simple, the data is stored digitally. So that's where the IRS is going. So people need to be prepared for that. And there's a number of ways to do that. One is the trust companies, the banks, other financial advisors need to be able to offer this to their customers, because this is probably what they're going to be facing with custodians or regulators or the IRS down the road. So it's an early form. I've got about 65 people on the beta project right now, using it regularly. So we're learning from that data and information to improve the program. And it's really what people need. It's an evolving situation where people need to be more thorough with how these transactions are happening.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, you really been in this space for a long time. I mean, you really started a retirement plan administration fintech in 2015. Of course, you sold it to Yield Street in 2019. You moved to New York City. Congratulations, on that. That must be so much fun. But one thing, when I think about New York, I think about things in the millions and the billions. But one thing that's really interesting, I'm not even sure if I read it correctly because it's such a big number. When we talk about 60 million IRAs, I mean, one number that just stood out to me, forget about millions and billions, there's over 37 trillion in savings and investments in these IRAs. So that's a big number. That's a big opportunity that you and your platform really are providing, this expedited sort of software opportunity to so many people. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. And to add more numbers to that, there's 5 million 401ks that are rolled into IRAs every year. And the average 401k balance is over $60,000. So this is something that's happening out there in American savings. It's not going away. It's only getting bigger. And one interesting thing about that is the scale of this is enormous. When I sold WealthFlex to Yield Street, the reason that Yield Street was a good acquirer is because all of the investments that Yield Street sold to retail customers, they're allowed in your IRA account or your 401k plan. So there was one of the things that we had trouble scaling with WealthFlex was all these people open up these accounts. It goes in the bank account, they get a checkbook, they're participating in their investments, but there had to be somebody there to help them decide if they can or can't do it. So that was hampering our scaling ability. It wasn't the scaling problem wasn't that there weren't a lot of people who wanted to do it. A lot of people wanted to do it. The problem is we couldn't open them up fast enough with the highest quality of service needed in order for people to administer the retirement plan. So Yield Street was perfect. All of their investments are allowed in retirement plans. There's no disqualified party issues there. It's very simple. So they were a great natural acquirer. And Yield Street today has the only in-house IRA product that can do this type of thing. So it's fantastic that they can do an ACAT transfer, which is an automated transfer of a Fidelity cash IRA in cash, move it into a Yield Street IRA, and then into private investments all electronically. It's the only company of its kind that's able to do that. And I was happy to be part of developing that product for them. But the scalability is a real issue for the people who have direct checkbook control over their retirement plan and buying these private investments. They really need some help.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We talk on the show all the time, Joey, as you know from watching the show, that if you can solve a massive problem, you might just have something there. And in this particular case, compliance is very low. There's very little guidance coming from the IRS with regard to this investment opportunity. And really, when you think about it, there's not enough qualified advisors in this space. And for regular people, it would just be too expensive to consult with, these qualified advisors. So you've really sort of changed the rules. You've kind of turned it over and said, hey, there's this massive problem. The only workable solution right now is really technology that brings in all this different information and makes it very easy for someone to understand what's happening. So let's talk about it a little bit more. The platform, I mean, if I have an IRA right now and I want to get involved, is the platform ready to roll? Can I get involved in the beta? Where's it at right now?
Yeah, so I also run a retirement plan administration company called Aspira Plans. So aspiraplans.com, you can open up an account. And the platform for scripting the transactions is with Vetted Retirement Technologies, another one of my companies that is doing the technology around this field. And with Vetted, it's essentially a dynamic smart form. So it is learning from you how you're answering the early questions to decide what question to present to you next, which in turn has the platform decide what question to ask you after that, until it has enough information to make a conclusion, just like TurboTax would do. And the conclusions are interesting in that they are telling you what you can, if you can do this transaction, and it'll give you the fail if you can't. It'll say you cannot loan money to your mother. That's a prohibited transaction. So you can back up and say, okay, what if it's my cousin? Okay, yes, you can loan money to your cousin. Your cousin is not a disqualified party to your retirement plan. So it will go through, ask you all the questions. After it fully understands what the transaction is, it will give you what your reporting requirements are, what the taxation could be, what your activity constraints are. And it even gets down to a thing called nested entities, which is something I've seen so many people try to layer on LLC on top of LLC. You know, I've got an LLC and I'm going to do another LLC here that I also own. And there's another LLC that this brother owns. And then they're going to loan the money to my mom. Well, intent is a very important thing. And if you're layering on LLCs just to get to where you think you could loan money to your mother, a disqualified party, this program will find that out, because it's all about the individual when it comes to disqualified parties. It will ask you if that LLC, it will scrub it until it knows who the owners of that LLC are. It will scrub who those owners of LLC are for permissibility, and eventually come down to the yes or the no answer. So it's something that's difficult. It's going to be very difficult for an IRS examiner, especially one who's only been recently trained on how to examine an IRA or solo 401k or larger company plan. The Department of Labor is the organization that advises the IRS on how to examine these plans, and they're busy. So they don't nearly have enough people to even train the IRS examiners, let alone be there to help them scrub these transactions. So automation is the only way this is going to happen.
Yeah, I love it. Of course, you've only cut out a certain amount of time. I want to talk about that automation briefly. I want to get a little geeky with you, and then I want to talk about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I'll just call it for a simplified explanation. You have a smart form, a smart technology, a smart platform where there's almost some type of AI as the process goes through, and, you know, based on a tree, you know, you get to the outcome by answering these questions. How long does something like that take to build? And, you know, let's talk about the technology behind it. You know, is it you building it? Do you have a team building it? Let's talk about that, because that's very fascinating.
Yeah. So the challenge is having all of the code and case law. And I don't want to lose all of your listeners. If I start talking about 408 and 401 of the code and case law, people are going to, you know, not listen. I don't want to do that. But basically, you take all of that data, all that information, and you have to deliver it to technical people who are able to program the tool. And then you need a program manager that is able to bring the two together. And then you need a usability expert to be able to have this workable from an individual to come in and be able to utilize it, either as a regulator, IRS, industry participant, or an investor themselves. So there's a lot of parties involved, and we built it over the pandemic, and it was a really fun project. If you saw my walls during that time, we were really architecting out. I looked like one of those crazy people with the strings and the newspaper articles and the things written on the wall. If somebody came in, they like called the medical professionals. This guy's lost it. But it turned into a scientific usability study that was really fun. The developers enjoyed the project. We've all enjoyed it. We'd all like to see it now be utilized more. We could use some partners in deploying this. So it's been a really fun project. It's 99% workable. It will give you a decision and ongoing constraints on 99% of all transactions that you could possibly do with a retirement plan. You can stump it. There are crazy things that you could be planning to do with your IRA 401k, where the program's like, what are you talking about? And it's not going to know what to do. And it's just going to give you a phone number. It's going to call me, and I'm like, how'd you stump it? Because we need to fix that. So I'm actually over the last year, it's been stumped a few times, and I appreciate that. And my clients who are utilizing this now, they're a lot of them are my friends, and they recognize that, hey, I crashed your program. I'm like, how? It is actually testing a program like that would be expensive. You would have to have a number of test engineers going through trying to break it. And it would cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through it and try to come up with all the ways it's broken. And just little by little, it just kind of broke itself, and we were able to fix it each time. So that's how we're able to build it.
That's great. And of course, a great entrepreneur will invite his program or her program to get broken, because that makes you better and it gives you an opportunity for improvement, which really leads me to entrepreneurship. And by the way, the wall that was the crazy wall where you had everything, I hope you have a picture of that, because I could see that being the cover of the book that you're going to write about this platform. Let's talk about entrepreneurship, Joey. I mean, we have younger entrepreneurs watching the show. Of course, you had a successful exit. You've been in this field for a long time. We have younger entrepreneurs watching the show, but even older entrepreneurs that maybe are hitting a roadblock. Maybe they're hitting a tough time. Maybe they freeze in the frame. You know how that goes. Mm-hmm. What type of advice can you give to the entrepreneurs that are maybe hitting a roadblock or a tough time about how to keep on pushing, and what it takes as an entrepreneur to have that kind of mindset?
Right. So I get asked this question occasionally. And what I've told people is, they'll ask me, were you ever worried that your company was going to fail? And I was thinking back to WealthFlex, and I said, well, in the early days, I actually think it did fail a couple times. I just kept going to the office. So that's really great. What it is stick-to-itiveness. And, it's easier to stick to something you enjoy doing. So, they always say, if you do what you enjoy doing, you'll never work a day in your life. So when you're having challenges with your startup, if it's something you love to do, you'll find ways to get over it. And one thing that's very important for people to recognize is nobody has a clear, easy path. Well, I've seen some people, they just got lucky. It's like they went into something, there's a massive demand for it. They weren't very good at it. They didn't really care that much about it. And somehow they laze their way into this great financial success. It happens, but not very often. Most of the time, it's a challenge, and there are periods of time where you're thinking this may not work. I mean, there's even times where Elon Musk will say, there were decisions that we had to make that if it didn't go well, that was the end of Tesla. It was just going to be it. So it's never going to be easy. And people always have to fight through that, but just as part of the process, because when you do make it and people are asking you, what was it like? Did you ever have problems? It's like, yeah, I had problems. And what people will do is they will always talk about those struggles, those scary moments, the weird things that happened, the fear that they had. And those are things that they're the most proud of. They're not most proud of their yacht or their fancy house or their great lifestyle. They're not going to talk about that when they're in front of a room asking, people are asking questions. They're going to be bragging about that time when they should have just been done and they didn't give up and they kept going. So enjoy those moments. You're going to be bragging about them one day yourself.
I love it. What a great story, especially, where you weren't sure if you had a business, but you kept going in. I mean, I loved it. I mean, that reminds me of a Seinfeld episode where George was fired from his job. For the people that watch Seinfeld, it's an old time show. Back on Netflix now, but George was fired from his job, and they decided the next day that he would just go in and pretend that he never was fired and act like nothing happened. But as entrepreneurs, sometimes you have to act like nothing happened and keep on pushing. Joey, I'm going to bring you back on the show. We just want to talk the next time all about entrepreneurship, but I really wanted to get in and talk about vetted retirement technologies today. I mean, what a great platform. I love what you're doing. It's a big problem that you're solving, and I want to congratulate you so much. And wow, thank you so much for coming on the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today. We opened our eyes up a little bit and love talking about alternative investments within the plan. And wow, what a great space you're in.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.